I love Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, I think he's pretty good.
No, like, I love Robert Pattinson. But do you know what I love more than Robert Pattinson is?
Your family, friends, your soon-to-be wife?
No, Robert Pattinson's ass. What'd you see twice in this movie? It's a 17 out of 10 movie just because of that. Go see his ass.
Now that you've all seen that guy's ass
twice,
the budget for this movie is actually kind of high compared to what we've seen the last couple times. 118 million. It's got Mark Ruffalo's in it. Bong Joon-ho directed it. He also directed Parasite.
Robert Pattinson.
That guy, he was in Tenet.
Yeah, Robert Pattinson.
The boy in the Heron. What? Who? That's the same guy?
Yeah, Robert Pattinson. Yeah, most notably for his work in Tenet, I believe. Yeah.
I'll trust you on that one. I thought it was a different one because it's kind of a common name. So he was also Batman.
Speaking of which,
time out. Pause. What the heck is that? You see that in the bottom right corner? Is that a watermark? Did he leave a watermark on his video? Oh my God. What an amateur. Let's all take the time right now to comment clown down below. Jeez. Back to our regularly scheduled content.
We haven't reviewed Batman, but we have reviewed The Penguin. You can go check that out over on our channel. And while you're over there, make sure to like and subscribe.
So first off, this movie is really consistent. Like the logic behind anything.
What do you think it feels like to die?
What?
Like, what do you think it feels like to die? Audience, what do you think it feels like to die? We'll answer the question at the end of the video.
We will tell you what it feels like to die at the end of the video. So as I was saying, there was never a point in time in this movie where I saw somebody do an action and I was like, what are they doing? This makes no sense. Where are we going with this? Everything has an action behind it. They do a really good job of outright explaining it to you, whether that be in past clips or from other characters just kind of talking to each other about current goings on. It was really well thought out. And I feel like we say that a lot about movies, but this one is really, really well thought out.
And in addition to all of that, some of the things that were also really consistent were the accents throughout the movie. I know Robert Pattinson and Mark Ruffalo had like distinct accents in their characters that were just consistent throughout the entire movie. I was looking to see if they would slip it up at any point. They just never did. And along with that, the characters' personalities were also super consistent. If somebody had a tendency to act a certain way, they were like that the whole movie. It didn't change up whatsoever. So it was quite satisfying because of that. But going into some of the negatives with this movie, there were quite a few questions that we had that we written down while watching that were just left unanswered. There were quite a few moments where it just felt like the scene was missing or something got taken out at some point. And in addition to that, there's also a dream sequence towards the end that kind of just felt out of place, I think. I'd have to see it again to see what happened and what's the purpose of it, but left us with questions for sure.
It really does feel like there was some scenes left on the cutting room floor. However, having said that, and I think you can agree with me on this, Andy, the movie doesn't feel unfinished. It still feels complete and whole, and the missing stuff doesn't really detract from the movie at all. So it still works. It's just little in a story that kind of answers a lot of questions. There are just a tiny little ones that are left over for you to kind of mull around in your head. And maybe that is the point of them. I'm not sure.
I mean, it's already a fairly long movie. I actually thought it felt like it was longer, and I actually felt like it could go another hour, and I would be very satisfied with that. I lost track of time watching this one, and I wanted it to keep going. So I was sad when it ended.
I wasn't ever bored. This is not a boring movie at all. And that's due in large from Robert Pattinson. His acting as Mickey, both 17 and 18, and all the previous Mickeys before, they had such character and personality, and you couldn't help but root for Mickey throughout the entire thing. He's kind of a pathetic guy, but definitely a character that sinks their teeth into you as an audience member, that you just can't help but be on his side throughout the entire movie. With that, all the supporting characters do everything within them to help elevate this performance because, again, Mickey is pathetic. He's what's called an expendable, which means that he can go out and die on these dangerous missions and they'll just reprint a new body for him in like this fancy body 3D printer thing. They don't really care about Mickey. It shows a lot through how they treat him, throughout his just job title in the movie, and how people just kind of leave him for dead, and they always interrupt him with weird questions like, what do you think it feels like to die? Or tell me what it feels like to die. Like, they don't really care to know. They're just trying to make this small talk with something that they view as a thing instead of a person.
I was pleasantly surprised and impressed with Robert Pattinson's acting by giving each of the Mickeys a slightly different personality type. That also added to the interest of the movie as it kept progressing. Another aspect I really liked in this movie were the politics, and I know there's a lot of politics in the world right now, but the politics in the movie were handled in a way that I swear they had a group of people sit in a room, had discussions as if this was a real world scenario, and came up with questions that you just wouldn't intuitively think about right away. It had to be questions that came about throughout conversations over multiple conversations on a daily basis. It was quite clever, some of the questions that they posed as to why you can't have two duplicates and all these other issues that divided the people. It is an issue to have a duplicate, and they mentioned that in the trailer, but without spoiling it, they do tell you and show you why it's important to not have duplicates. That part as well is super consistent and makes a lot of sense the moment you see that. And to touch on your point too, Nick, about how people treated Mickey as kind of like this object on just asking him blanket questions, like they didn't really have any care for him. I think the overall theme, well, I say I, but it's kind of both of us, we think the overall theme of this movie is mostly that titles are your identity. And that was very much emphasized by Mickey 17 being an expendable, and they very much treated him more like an expendable and less like a human.
And that's not just for Mickey. That goes for the other characters too. You have the head doctors making questionable decisions, both ethically and morally. You have the captain of the ship who's just kind of a piece of shit. And they just buy into this, and everybody's got their own place, and this is what they are. And Mickey's just kind of a thing to be used. And it goes to show how wrong that is. Now we need to break away from that.
But let's wrap this up and let's give our recommendations. Nick, do you recommend people go to the theaters to see this movie?
I definitely do. There are two big reasons for that. One's the left cheek, one's the right cheek.
I double dip on that. We also recommend that you go see this in a Dolby Atmos theater. There are certain times where the sound and just the whole ambience just really is more immersive within a Dolby Atmos theater. So if you have the opportunity, go see it there. But what do you give it for a score out of 10?
Out of 10, this was pretty easy for me. This gets a 9 out of 10.
I give it a 9 out of 10 as well.
Pretty easy. There's a lot to sink your teeth into with this movie. It's just entertaining all around. And like we both said, we wanted to see more of it. I kind of hope there is a director's cut of this movie. I just kind of want to sit down and watch it again. I did feel this when I watched Dune and Dune 2. It's hard to criticize it in any way. The only thing that I had negative to say was that I didn't quite hear the music. It was blended in too much, maybe a little bit, but that's very minor.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I agree with everything you just said there. For me, where I fall just a little bit short is I felt like the storyline could have had a plot that just had a little bit more struggle to it. But with that said, it was still a really good story that I wanted to keep going. So it's hard to fault it too much.
And now for the most important part, to answer the question that you want to know. What does it feel like to die? And we've got somebody pretty special to come answer that question. Not Andy.
Okay, so picture this, right? You're dying. And it's like when you're at a restaurant. You order the soup, right? The clam chowder. And it looks great, but then you take a bite and it's sand. It's just sand. Just gritty, awful sand. No cream, no potatoes, or hell, not even fake bacon. It's just rocks. And you're like, wait, is this even clam chowder? Or did they just scoop sand off the beach? And the waiter, he's just staring at you like, yeah, it's chowder, what's the problem? You expect something more, maybe a light, maybe a tunnel, maybe I don't know, clam chowder. But instead, it's just sand. Just sand in your mouth, and you're thinking, this can't be it. This is garbage. And then, bam, you're gone, just like that, and you're thinking, did I even live? Was any of that good? And you start to remember that one time you went to the hot dog eating contest, and you puked on the mayor, and you're like, oh yeah, that was pretty good. But then sand, just more sand. I don't know.
Thanks, Not Myself. And comment down below if
I'm a clown.
Thank you for liking and subscribing. And remember, we're just two regular dudes
Doing regular reviews. You want to know what dying's like? You want to know what dying's like?